Welcome to Module 3 of Introduction to Water Quality. This module is a combination of workbook materials and video. The information contained in this module will give you some ideas about collaborating, understanding group dynamics, working with groups, and facilitating productive outcomes. Incorporating this information into your local plans will help get your project off to a successful start. Most citizens take an active interest in the management of our natural resources. Water resources ranks very high, perhaps number one. Unfortunately, understanding of this resource and of the problems surrounding its management is often incomplete, resulting in misunderstandings of issues and the complexity involved. Consequently, the NRCS, in cooperation with CSREES and EPA, is working to increase the understanding of the steps necessary to gain public support and active participation. Establishing strong links among agencies, organizations, and individuals is critical to a project's success. This takes time, a lot of hard work, and commitment. Just as no one system is responsible for creating a problem, no one system can solve it. The more we work together, the more we have the possibility of understanding complex problems and acting on them in an atmosphere of cooperation and respect. Many groups, organizations, and government agencies are concerned about water quality, but their approaches differ. By addressing issues collaboratively, the existing problems are more accurately defined and the occurrence of conflicting messages is minimized. Also, inaccuracies are reduced, information is better coordinated, and misinformation is curtailed. In this way, groups are able to communicate consistent messages and implement acceptable changes. Involving key individuals and cooperating organizations will help you focus on significant problem areas and increase positive results. The development of open communication between group members and cooperators enhances the two-way flow of information vital to improving water quality.
On behalf of the North American Wetlands Conservation Fund, it's my privilege to present this $326,400 grant award to the East Basin National Wildlife Refuge.
It's one of the most exciting things that is going on in South Carolina and indeed the nation today insofar as the environment is concerned. Ultimately, we're going to preserve approximately 350,000 pristine acres.
Truly a witness in the beginning of a model project for the whole nation. We're proud of you for coming. Thank you. God bless you.
The Ace River Basin, 350,000 acres of coastal wetlands. Across the North American continent, other wetlands are vanishing at the rate of 1,000 acres per day. Yet the future of the Ace Basin appears secure. What did it take to save it? The cynics wouldn't have given it a chance. It's squeezed between growing urban and recreation areas on the South Carolina coast. With Charleston to the north and Beaufort and Hilton Head to the south, it was right in the path of seaside condominiums, suburbs, and urban sprawl. And it's in Colleton County, a poor rural area. Any interference with economic development here, especially by an environmental effort, is almost unthinkable. And it's in the heart of the Old South where government intervention is often viewed with suspicion, if not outright hostility. It's a complicated and unusual story, and full of the human qualities of passionate dedication, political savvy, sheer perseverance, and a little luck. The heart of the protection effort is the ACE Basin Task Force, a 5-member group who represent 2 conservation organizations, state and federal government agencies, and private landowners. Behind their official titles runs a deep personal commitment to the ACE Basin. Several of these members grew up here, and all have close ties to the area. Each one brings his own set of valuable experiences and skills to the work of the task force.
We formulated the task force, I think, in late 1988. And when we joined forces with the South Carolina Wildlife Department, Ducks Unlimited, the Nature Conservancy, and shortly thereafter we got the Fish and Wildlife Service directly involved. And then our 5th partner was the landowners.
What is the ACE, and why does it inspire such impassioned effort? A biologist would say it has exceptional habitat diversity. A poet has said that it is extraordinary in its wealth of natural events. Both descriptions are true. The ACE contains 50 distinct natural communities: salt, brackish, and freshwater marshes, bottomland hardwoods, shell middens, marsh islands, 2 virtually untouched coastal barrier islands. It's home for over 500 species of plants and animals, including 17 rare or endangered species. And it's the point at which 3 pristine estuarine rivers reach the sea. These rivers, the Ashepoo, Combahee, and South Edisto, give the ACE its name. Patrick Morgan, a task force member, did his graduate work in the basin over 20 years ago.
The vision of the Nature Conservancy was immediately that this was one of the most unique, near pristine wetland ecosystems on the eastern seaboard. And their vision about this project was relative to their mission. And it would fit exactly hand in glove with the Nature Conservancy's mission, that we will protect unique ecosystems, rare and or endangered plants and or animals, and the lands in which they live.
Yet the ACE is home to people as well. Overall, it's a poor area. Most residents are heavily dependent on the farming and timber harvesting that takes place in the dry upland regions. Down near the coast, it's a different story. Large blocks of wetlands are owned by a relatively small group of wealthy landowners. They view their land as a haven for sportsmen and naturalists, and they have a long tradition of protecting the environment. Gaylord Donnelly, a philanthropist and landowner who died in 1992, was the inspiration for the ACE Basin project.
When I say protect, I'll relate a story like Mr. Donnelly told me one time. He said he was a conservationist, not an environmentalist. A conservationist is one that is a good steward of the land and works as a good steward. An environmentalist is one that really doesn't want to do anything. We just leave it alone.
The balance between management and preservation has drawn wide-ranging support. The list of over 60 organizations that support the project is impressive. They include federal, state, and local government agencies, conservation, environmental, and industry groups, and a number of private landowners. Equally impressive is the list of powerful individuals who have given personal support to the project, including both senators from South Carolina. The ACE Basin project can be viewed as many small projects, all coordinated by the 5-member task force. The lion's share of the work is delegated to a system of specialized subcommittees. It adds up to a large and complex network whose overriding goal is the preservation of the entire 350,000 acres of the basin. Preservation has been accomplished in a variety of ways. Conservation and environmental groups provide funds for outright purchase of land. The land is transferred to governmental agencies, who establish refuges and wildlife management areas. The success of this collaborative approach points the way for future projects.
I think joint ventures are going to be the way of the future in many cases now. As a matter of fact, in almost all cases. Instead of looking at just trying to protect small areas the way we have in the past, with these joint ventures, we can look at it on an overall scale and work together to accomplish things that we couldn't do by ourselves.
Joint ventures, or any collaborative effort, are not easy, even when all groups agree on a common goal.
One of the biggest challenges in the ACE Basin, I think, is when we put our initial task force group together, which was representative of several diverse organizations in the state, is to realize that each of those organizations had a mission and they had objectives. And trying to bring all those objectives together, you have to give and you have to take. That was a challenge I think we all had to realize in our own minds initially to get things really moving.
With only 5 members, the task force is able to quickly resolve conflicts and move forward. And they have always been extremely focused. Their sole aim is the preservation of the ACE Basin, and there has been no wavering from that single-minded goal.
Keep the group fairly small. You get too large of a group, you end up arguing too much, you don't end up with a productive meeting.
Get a minimum of 5 successful businessmen. Success breeds success. They're not going to take the task unless they're going to be successful. And if you do that, and in a maximum of 7, you want it lean horse for a long race. And by doing that, you can move and you can act.
But the effort can never achieve its future vision without the cooperation of local landowners. Fortunately, landowners can gain tax advantages by creating easements on their property. Easements effectively preserve private land while allowing limited types of development. The task force has made a great effort to gain the support of those who own the largest blocks of land, and these landowners are generally sympathetic with the aims of the task force. Charles Lane grew up nearby on the historic Willtown plantation, and he represents the landowners on the task force.
It's partnerships that we have established early on that have made the project successful. The first partnership was a partnership with private landowners. The second partnership was a partnership between government and private entities. And then the third partnership was a partnership between conservation organizations themselves.
Even with the broad-based support of over 60 organizations, national political figures, and the large landowners, one piece of the puzzle has been missing: input by small local groups.
I think this whole process has to be an inclusive one in developing the policy, inclusive of all these particular interests groups, and not just consult with them, but I'm talking about meaningful impact or input on the development of the ACE Basin.
I feel like anyhow that the average citizen that has lived in this county all of his life has not had the chance to participate in the process of the ACE Basin, especially farmers. The local Soil Conservation Service was not included, or their members were not included on the ACE Basin panel. It seems like we were left out, and just people from outside have done most of the planning.
Not surprisingly, John Frampton disagrees.
The local people are, in fact, involved in our decision-making. One of our task force members owns land in the ACE Basin. He's a landowner in the ACE Basin, and he lives in the ACE Basin part of the time. We have also created a number of committees that we have put a large number of local people on those committees.
With little perceived input and having to rely on the media for information, many locals have serious concern about economic impact. Local governments are concerned about the loss of tax revenue, and industries and businesses fear restrictions on agriculture and timber harvesting.
We're a very rural county, very poor county. We have a very small tax base. Most of our tax base is agriculture. And many of the developed counties have a much larger tax base to improve their county services, the schools, roads, bridges, whatnot. We don't have that advantage. And when you take a third of the county and basically declare it off limits to any type of development, you severely impact that tax base.
While the task force is aware of this dissent, they haven't been able to address all the concerns. With such a complex project to manage, and with so many sub-projects to coordinate and initiatives to direct, there simply hasn't been time.
sometimes I get disappointed because I'm strongly committed to this project and I know the answers to some of these concerns, but I haven't had time to sit down with individuals and explain it to them. I haven't had an opportunity or the time to really go through numbers with somebody to let them see both sides of an issue.
The task force is unanimous in saying that the real problem lies in a broader area.
The major challenge that the task force has faced is communications.
One of the biggest ones has been communication.
We did start developing various types of media to get to the public. I think we did a very adequate job of that during the late stages. But as you know, or as everyone knows, a lot of news articles don't reach everybody. There are people out there that are not going to get every piece of news media that goes out. So we probably should have had a more diversified approach to getting that information to the public. That was probably one of our mistakes.
But communication is a two-way street. In a larger sense, it means involvement by all those who are communicating. The problems and hard feelings that are cropping up now could possibly have been avoided if more groups had been included early on, especially those who would be most impacted by changes in the area.
It's really just about too late for us, but because we weren't given the input as far as agriculture is concerned, and other industries, I think, in the county too. And get involved early, and because your future depends on it.
Try to work for local control. Local control is very important, and that's one thing we've lost in this case. We've had a lot of outside conservation groups, well-meaning, well-minded groups, but they come in, they spend money, they make decisions, and local people have to live with them.
Despite the dissension, the cynics have been answered. It can be done. With more than a touch of Southern pride and independence, Patrick Morgan sums up why the project has continued to be successful.
In the beginning, the attitude by outsiders was, you will never succeed. But we proved them wrong because we were focused. We all had the same mission.
Preservation of the ACE now seems within reach, thanks to the dedicated efforts of the task force and their skillful management of a complex situation. They have created a web of private and governmental support that has grown faster and been more successful than even they thought possible. Yet the ACE Basin, with its eternal beauty and endless diversity, should serve as a reminder that time is the key to real change. Time to grow solid support, to answer all the questions, and time to bring everyone into the fold. It is a landscape that is uniquely American. the wide open spaces, where sky and land seem equally vast. 341 million acres of the western states are public rangeland, owned and managed by the U.S. government. Despite its harsh beauty and ecological diversity, the land has been considered worthless by many. The Bureau of Land Management was formed just to get rid of it. And yet, for the past 20 years, the fate of our public land has been at the center of a fierce controversy between those who would preserve it and those who would use it. Back in the 1880s, Fred Ottley's grandfather headed west and eventually settled here in the high desert of southeastern Oregon. Today, the Ottleys run the family ranch and graze their cattle on part of the 7 million acres of public land in this region. For that access, they and other ranchers pay the government a small monthly fee for each of their animals that feed there.
We have a lot of ties here to the land. We have the same needs and the same feelings and the same interest as the other people coming in. It's just that maybe the issues are a little closer to us.
Government agencies exerted little control on ranchers' use of public land until the late 1960s. That's when the environmental movement was born and began expressing concern over private use and possible abuse of the nation's natural resources. Out west, ranchers and environmentalists squared off in a modern-day range war, using lawyers as hired guns. Government agencies were caught in the middle, and the result has been a paralysis of policy. Perhaps it's a measure of how bad things got that these independent-minded ranchers and environmentalists finally sat down together to talk, to form working groups, and to try and reach an understanding. Susie Hammond, chairperson of the Harney County Cattlewomen.
The people who are trying to use the land or natural resource users of the land were coming at them from the other side, and the Bureau of Land Management in our instance, but not in everyone's instance, was kind of, their hands were tied. They couldn't move. Every time that they did something, somebody filed an appeal, someone filed a lawsuit, and then everybody lost.
Cal Brantley, retired scientist and member of the Native Plant Society of Oregon.
I remember starting up the Harney group, Harney County group, that the number of times that we spent whole evening just really arguing, you know, why should we work together? What good's it going to do for either one of us? I don't know, I guess it was just a matter we talked long enough to begin to understand each other.
Working groups do work, but they can also fail. Especially in the early stages, groups may need guidance, someone with experience in group process.
The facilitator is probably going to be something different to different people, but it is an individual to me that can handle a complex involvement at a meeting.
Bill Peratt of the Forest Service has occasionally served as a facilitator for the Malheur Lakes Working Group.
Originally, my motivation to getting involved in consensus groups was probably stemmed from the fact that we need to understand what is concerning people and what they believe, and we need that to add quality to the decisions that we make about resource management.
Members come to those first meetings with a variety of feelings, experiences, and expectations. Diversity gives a working group its strength, but these differences must be expressed and dealt with before any progress can be made.
One of the really key things that I would advise to, say, a steering committee or a planning group that's starting a project in its infancy is to identify what the real issues and affected interests are and very, very actively seek representation in the initial group.
Part of the reason I got involved in working groups was because of a lot of misinformation out there, both from all standpoints. And I was looking for a forum where people's knowledge and the science and the agency process could come together.
Whoever tries to push this thing on has got to have a good motivation in the first place. They've got to have some hate to use the word private agenda, but it's almost that. There has to be something that's goading you to get into the thing.
And in order for a decision to have support, it has to be understood by the people that are affected. They have to feel some ownership in the quality of that decision. And the consensus group is an opportunity to accomplish those things.
If the group is to survive, its members must make a commitment to the group. The first step is learning to listen with respect. Everyone must decide and express where they really stand on the issues, and that involves taking the personal risk of being open. A key part of the commitment is building trust, and that takes time.
Some of the key ingredients to working in a working group is to build respect for each other, to have trust in each other, and I personally still don't have trust. I don't think that you build 100% trust ever. You just build enough respect to listen to the other person. Listening to the other person is the thing that's the most important.
How much risk is going to be okay to take is a question that a lot of our participants are mulling around in their mind, and it's only after they've been in the group for a while and kind of get a feel for that do they really know the answer, and some never do.
After groups reach the stage of trusting each other, they can begin to work toward consensus. As their diverse points of view begin to converge, the membership gains a measure of power known as the wisdom of groups.
If we want to go out and tell the politicians what we want to do, they're going to listen to us. Because we represent such a wide-ranging group of people. We're non-environmentalists, we're ranchers, government types, environmentalists, all working together.
After the initial stages, groups can confront the real issues. The first step toward action is focusing on a specific goal, and then educating themselves about it. The Malheur Lakes Working Group focused on the spread of the juniper plant over large areas around Steens Mountain, a national recreation area. The juniper is acknowledged by ranchers and environmentalists alike as a destructive plant because it takes up a tremendous amount of precious water from the arid land. Unchecked, the juniper will eliminate not only the grass's need for grazing cattle, but also many rare plant species. Group wisdom and a growing feeling of empowerment gave the Malheur Lakes Working Group a new perspective on their role with the government. They saw that what government agencies needed most from them was consensus.
One of the things that's been really frustrating to us, to me in particular, and some of the other people who think like I do in the group, is the slowness of the movement of the government. And in order for us to get some change in how the government handles the juniper, we have to change the policy.
And I think that as this distrust has grown over the years, that we are finding that sometimes it's better off to cut the government out of it, that we do better if we are working together directly without the government layer in the middle here. That's not to say you don't want the government involved, you do, but you want them involved as an advisory capacity.
I'm a big believer in local people solving their issues, taking into account the needs of people outside the local area as local decisions affect non-local people. I just don't think there's a way for resource management in the future to be successful without this approach.
After a year and a half, the Malheur Lakes Group is one of several successful working groups in eastern Oregon. But there are many barriers to progress. The great distances make it difficult for everyone to get together on a regular basis. Many people get frustrated with the process because it works so slowly, while others have the opposite problem, a fear of change.
Another barrier, quite frankly, that's common is the threat that change or the need to change provides. Whether we like to admit it or not, most of us are really fairly comfortable with the way things are in a given situation. And so to one degree or another, change is threatening to all of us.
Don't get discouraged. It's real easy to get discouraged and fed up with the program It's not a short-term process. It's a way of life, really. It's not something that you're going to get into and get out of. And you keep thinking that, oh, if I do this little bit, then it's going to go away. It's not going to go away. It's a way of life. It's the world, the way we're going to live in it from now on.
Sometimes the greatest value of groups is the personal effect on individual group members. A fundamental change in outlook seems to be a common experience.
I think that I've learned from the working group process that everyone's an individual. And that before I got involved in the working group process, I think I lumped a lot of people together. If they had a different perspective of my own, I kind of looked at them as one, and I reacted accordingly. And now I automatically find who the individual is and find out what his perspective is, and I don't lump all environmentalists together. I automatically look at them as individuals, and I now know that think alike and they don't feel the same about the issues, and that's been I think one of the greatest benefits to me personally, because I overcame my own personal biases because I found that out.
Whatever humans do, the land will remain. Yet our care of the land will leave its mark. So in some measure, its fate is in our hands. If we can find wisdom in group, will be tested, and the results will be here for succeeding generations to judge.
It's happening all around us. By some estimates, more than 11 million times per day. They draw us in seemingly beyond our control. Whenever 3 or more of us get together, before we know it, we're having a meeting. Yes, it's another meeting. Why do so many people feel that meetings are unproductive, boring, or something to dread? Well, all of us have been in meetings we wish we could have walked away from, like the meetings that turned into gripe sessions, or were dominated by 1 or 2 aggressive personalities, or the time the discussion wandered so far off track that you couldn't remember what the subject was in the first place. Well, I'm here to tell you, my friends, that there is a better way. Oops, I guess I got carried away. Well, these things have no place in the kind of meeting I'm talking about. This type of meeting is guided by a facilitator whose sole job is to focus the group's energy on a common task. A second member of the team is the recorder, who writes the group's ideas on large pieces of paper in full view of the group. This paper record is called the group memory, because it keeps the group's ideas out in the open for everyone to focus on and refer to throughout the meeting. Now, this type of method may not be right for every situation, but it is right when a group of people must collaborate, like when a group has to brainstorm or solve a problem or reach a consensus, you know, a win-win decision, or when people of diverse backgrounds must focus on a common task. Here's how this video will work. I'll play the role of facilitator, and my friendly little group will help. As we have our meeting, we'll pass on some tips and techniques. Let's start with some general principles. Good communication skills come first. In a nutshell, always use I messages when you talk. That is, say how you are feeling and avoid speaking for someone else. Always remember your role. You're not a chairperson. A facilitator provides a structure that helps the group accomplish its goals. It takes someone who can be on center stage but keep the spotlight turned on the audience. The best facilitators don't talk very much. Make them do the talking. And that's hard work. Above all, keep your opinions about the subject matter to yourself. If you do feel a strong need to express your opinion, ask the group's permission to step outside your role for a minute. Like this. Group, excuse me, but I would really like to tell you how I feel about this issue. Would you mind if I stop being a facilitator for a minute?
No, no, of course not.
Thanks. Now, I think that we should take part in this project. You get the idea. And let everyone know when you're back in your facilitator role. Don't do this often. Remember, if the issue is one that you really feel strongly about, you might think seriously about having someone else facilitate the meeting. Getting started may be the most important part, and it's probably where you'll do the most talking. At the beginning, you'll have to establish the ground rules and define everyone's role, especially your own. Consensus is what makes the facilitation method work. Right away, get agreement on the consensus process, and then get permission to enforce that agreement. Okay, group. My name is Mary Ann, and I'm serving as your facilitator. First, I want to make sure that we're clear on procedures. Do we all agree that we'll operate by consensus?
Why, of course, Mary Ann, you've got my vote.
Certainly. Good. Now, consensus means that everyone gets heard and that everyone can support the decision before we go on. Do I have permission to make sure that happens? Sure, sure. Great. Next, you'll need to get agreement on the purpose of the meeting. It helps to focus on the outcome. Okay, let's define the outcome of our session today. Or you can put it as a question. Okay, what will success look like when we're through today? Remember, if the group decides the outcome, then they'll have a major stake in making it happen. They will own the agenda, not a steering committee or a chairperson. As a last step toward getting things going, you'll probably need to suggest a process. Keep this and everything else upbeat. So the meeting is off and running. Now let's look at the other essential role. What does it take to be a good recorder? Good listening skills come first, of course. You need to capture the essence of the discussion, but do not edit or paraphrase. Try to use the exact words of the speaker, but only enough so the idea can be understood later. Above all, remain neutral. Do not contribute your own ideas. You may lag behind, especially when the ideas are coming thick and fast. That's okay. Just ask people to repeat themselves or slow down. If things get really hectic, you can draft another person to help record while the facilitator acts as a traffic director. Recording can be a fun job, but you have to work hard to keep it organized. Change colors and the size of your writing to highlight ideas. Divide ideas into groups. Underline the most important points. Use stars, arrows, numbers, dots, whatever it takes. This is organization on the fly. Keep things in order by numbering every sheet. Okay, you've got the meeting started. Now you've got to keep it going and maintain that creative momentum. Remember to stay neutral. If someone asks you a question about the subject matter, don't give in to temptation. Boomerang the question, right back to the group.
What do we need to discuss first?
That's up to the group. What do you think we should discuss first? Or,
could you explain that last point?
okay, who can answer that question? Sometimes you'll just need to play dumb. Actually, playing dumb is a good way to get the group to refocus. Make them explain the process to you. Hey, I'm lost. Can someone please tell me what's going on?
Sure, yeah.
Regaining focus is something you'll have to do throughout the meeting. It's a major part of your job to keep everything on track and moving forward. Okay, let's work on one thing at a time. I'm sorry, but I can't facilitate if we have two conversations going on at once. Please try to help us stay on track. As the meeting progresses, you'll need to change activities as each one runs its course. But each time you propose a change, give the group the opportunity to respond. Don't just assume they're with you. We've got a pretty good list here. Are we ready to set some priorities?
Sure, yeah, sure.
Before we go on, is there anyone who just can't live with this decision? The group memory is the centerpiece of your meeting. Use it often to regain focus and to keep the group from going over old ground. We've got a pretty good list here. Are we ready to set some priorities? The subject that most intimidates new facilitators is handling objections and problem people. But when things get emotional, it might be a signal that the group is getting down to the really important issues, and that's when they need your help the most. Sometimes just describing the situation to the group is all that's required to change a problem behavior. Remember your communication skills. Use I messages to avoid putting people on the defensive. Let's be sure we're not trying to finish before we're ready. Does anyone else want to close off the subject? Okay. I feel like we're getting hung up about this point. When you're facilitating, it's okay to deflect or defer objections that could derail the whole meeting. Can you hang in with us for a few more minutes and see if we can make some progress? Along the same line, you can just accept criticism and throw it back out to the group. You don't think we're getting anywhere? What do the rest of you think? The group process is one area where you must maintain control. Your credibility and neutrality could be at stake. You were charged with enforcing the agreements about the group process, and sometimes you have to be strict for the sake of the group. Joe, please let Linda finish. I'm sorry, Bob, but time is up. We have to move on.
But...
Above all, don't let the meeting deteriorate into arguments about process. The hallmark of this way is flexibility. There's no single right way to do things. John, I feel like either way will do. Which one shall we try first?
Oh, I think the first one.
Some people will try to dominate the discussion. If it gets out of control, others will fall silent and collaboration will break down. Sometimes these overbearing types are victims of their own enthusiasm, and other times they're just full of themselves. Your job is to make them conscious of their behavior with your body language and by positioning yourself. Try this 3-step process. First, stand close to them. Physical proximity should do the trick. If that doesn't work, stand directly behind them. Everyone will look at you over them. This works most of the time. Only then should you say something. And if you're sure it's appropriate, you might put your hand gently on the person's shoulder. Thanks, Jeff. Let's hear from someone else now. More often than not, you'll have the opposite problem of trying to get the silent types involved. Genuine, positive encouragement is the best solution. That was a good point, Bob. Linda, you look like you have something to add. Keep going, Jeff. This is really useful. We've only had time to present a few tips. You'll pick up a lot more as you gain experience. But if there's one thought that sums up the philosophy of the facilitation method, it's that all group members share responsibility for the success of the meeting. You don't have to be the facilitator in front of the group to practice facilitation skills. Every group member can use I messages, can take time to listen, participate with enthusiasm, and keep the meeting focused and on track. So next time you go to a meeting, whether you called it or not, sit there like a dummy. If there's anyone who can make it succeed, it's you.
Imagine America as an ecological wonder, a well-kept preserve of managed ecosystems, lakes, rivers, and wetlands teeming with life, lush, productive forests, pastures rich with grasslands and wildlife, farmland harvesting richer and richer yields, a balance of industry, agriculture, and Mother Nature. Sound too good to be true? Well, this was once a reality, and it can become that way again through proper management of our watersheds and the natural resources they contain. In Module 1, Introduction to Water Quality, you learned about the important role played by the Natural Resources Conservation Service in improving the quality of our nation's waters. Of course, this is just one of our responsibilities as part of our overall mission to protect our nation's precious soil, water, air, plant, and animal resources. NRCS has developed specific policies to carry out U.S. Department of Agriculture and NRCS water quality and quantity policies throughout the United States.
Our nation's water resources are valuable to all of us, and protection of these waters is paramount. With reductions in local, state, and national budgets, NRCS conservationists and others who protect our natural resources must learn to do more with less. The good news is that local solutions to watershed problems can best be achieved through partnerships. These partnerships can be at the federal, state, and local levels and must involve the public in their local communities. NRCS, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and states are partners in maintaining and protecting our nation's water resources.
As you implement policies that govern water quality at the watershed level, it is important for you to have an understanding of water quality standards. Water quality standards are the cornerstone of state and Indian tribal water quality management programs and the foundation of the watershed approach to pollution control. Throughout this presentation, when we refer to states, we're referring to the 50 states, the District of Columbia, U.S. territories, and Indian tribes with authority to administer the Water Quality Standards Program.
The objective of this module
is to provide you with information so that you understand the role of water quality standards in a state's water quality management program, understand how water quality standards are developed, and understand state and federal responsibilities in the water quality standards and criteria process. Your participant workbook, the workbook supplement, and reference manual that accompany this video tell you where to go to get specific information on a state's water quality standards. Let's begin. The Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, was established on December 2, 1970. Its mission is to control and abate pollution in the areas of air, water, solid waste, pesticides, radiation, toxic substances, and hazardous waste. In 1972, the Federal Water Pollution Control Act, commonly referred to as the Clean Water Act, was enacted by Congress. The Clean Water Act came about as a result of widespread public concern about the deteriorating condition of our nation's waters. The 1972 Act expanded and built upon existing laws designed to control and prevent water pollution. Successive amendments to the Clean Water Act of 1972, including the Clean Water Act of 1977 and the Water Quality Act of 1987, have brought about stronger environmental laws to protect our nation's waters. The objective of the Clean Water Act is to restore and maintain the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of our nation's waters. The interim goal of the Clean Water Act is to provide for the protection and propagation of fish, shellfish, and wildlife, and provide for recreation in and on the water. The shorthand expression for this interim goal is fishable, swimmable. The EPA is charged with the responsibility for implementing the Clean Water Act. Section 303C of the Clean Water Act authorizes states to establish water quality standards. The current Water Quality Standards regulation was issued on November 8, 1983. The Water Quality Act of 1965 created the first federal water quality standards program. As we've mentioned, water quality standards are the cornerstone of a state's water quality management program. Each state plays an important role in setting water quality standards. Water quality standards are adopted by states as laws or regulations. In setting water quality standards, a state designates uses for each water body, or the goals for each water body, and adopts water quality criteria to protect the designated uses. In addition to the uses and criteria, state water quality standards must contain an anti-degradation policy. Each of these components will be highlighted: uses, criteria, and the anti-degradation policy. Your participant workbook contains in-depth discussions about each of these components, as well as other important aspects of the Water Quality Standards program. In setting water quality standards, each state develops its own use classification system. Typical uses include propagation and protection of fish and wildlife, public water supplies, recreation, including boating and swimming, agricultural uses, industrial uses, and navigation. States are required to designate uses consistent with the fishable, swimmable goal of the Clean Water Act. As we have said earlier, that goal is to provide for the protection and propagation of fish, shellfish, and wildlife, and recreation in and on the water. At this point, it's important to understand the term existing use. An existing use is one attained on a water body on or after November 28, 1975. EPA issued the first Water Quality Standards regulation on November 28, 1975, which is the reason for this index date. An existing use, because it has been attained, cannot be modified or changed unless uses are added that require more stringent criteria. Another important term is designated use. A designated use, as compared to existing use, is one that is desired. It may or may not already be attained. As we mentioned, water quality standards contain criteria. Water quality criteria are limits on a particular pollutant or on a condition of a water body that are designed to protect and support a use. States consider which criteria are needed to protect the designated use and incorporate criteria into their water quality standards. When criteria are met, water quality is at a level to protect the designated use. States may adopt criteria published by EPA under Section 304A of the Clean Water Act, modify the Section 304A criteria to reflect site-specific conditions, or use other scientifically defensible methods to develop their criteria. There are 4 types of water quality criteria. EPA has developed human health and aquatic life criteria and is in the process of developing sediment and biological criteria. These different types of water quality criteria are complementary in nature. Human health and aquatic life criteria have been in existence for many years and are contained in state water quality standards. When sediment and biological criteria are developed, they will also be considered by a state when it sets water quality standards and evaluates the condition of a water body. In addition to uses and criteria, state water quality standards must contain an anti-degradation policy and a method for implementing it. The anti-degradation policy consists of 3 parts. The basic anti-degradation provision protects existing uses and the water quality necessary to protect those uses. This is the floor of water quality. It provides a minimum level of protection to all waters. The second component of anti-degradation allows, on a case-by-case basis, the lowering of water quality levels necessary to support propagation of fish, shellfish, and wildlife, and recreation in and on the water. The third component of anti-degradation involves defining, designating, and protecting outstanding national resource waters, or ONRWs as they're called. ONRWs include waters that are ecologically unique, such as wetlands and wildlife refuges. The 3 separate components of anti-degradation are referred to as tiers. State water quality standards must also include methods to be used to implement the anti-degradation policy. The Clean Water Act requires states to review their water quality standards at least once every 3 years and revise them if necessary. Some states review parts of their water quality standards every year. Other states undertake a comprehensive review every 3 years. Reviews are necessary because new scientific and technical data become available over time, and environmental changes may require the need for a review. After states officially adopt water quality standards, the governor, or his designee, submits the standards to the appropriate EPA regional administrator for review. There are 10 EPA regional administrators located across the United States. Your participant reference manual contains a listing of the states associated with each EPA region. In its review, EPA determines whether the standards meet the requirements of the law and EPA's water quality standards regulation. If EPA disapproves a state's standards, the agency will indicate what changes must be made so that the standards can be approved. If a state or Indian tribe fails to make the required changes, EPA issues new or revised water quality standards that are binding on the state. Water quality standards are implemented through a process known as the Water Quality-Based Approach to Pollution Control. Your participant workbook contains more information about the various stages in this multifaceted approach to water pollution control. In summary, water quality standards are the driving force of a state's water quality management program. It's important for you to have a basic understanding of the Water Quality Standards Program as you carry out your duties and responsibilities to protect this nation's vast and precious water resources. Your participant workbook and the supplement for Module 7 contain reading materials and other supporting documentation. Your reference manual contains valuable resource tools. It is intended to be a reference tool that you will refer to as you carry out your responsibilities. These items taken together, the video, the participant workbook, the supplement, and the reference manual, are all intended to foster a better understanding of the Water Quality Standards Program. With all of us working together as partners, we can indeed make America into the ecological wonder it once was.